Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a situation that, well, really blew the lid off the simmering conflict in the Middle East back in June 2025. It took the shadow war over Iran's nuclear ambitions and thrust it right into open military confrontation.
Yeah, it was a dramatic shift. You had Israel kicking things off with Operation Rising Lion, targeting Iranian nuclear sites, personnel.
Right. But then, just days later, June 21st, 22nd, the U.S. gets directly involved. B-2 stealth bombers hitting Natanz, Isfahan, and crucially, that super-buried facility at Fordow.
A direct American strike on Iranian soil against the nuclear program. Unprecedented, really.
Absolutely. So our mission here is to unpack all of this for you. We want to figure out just how close was Iran to getting a bomb right before those strikes?
A critical question.
And how did the U.S. manage to target, let alone damage, a place like Fordow buried so deep underground? What were their actual capabilities?
The intelligence and the ordnance, yeah. It's quite a story.
And maybe the biggest question, what does it all mean long term? Did these strikes solve the problem, or, did they just push it somewhere else, maybe make it even more dangerous?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The long-term fallout.
Okay, so let's start right before the bombs fell.
Yeah.
May 2025. Paint the picture for us. How close was Iran to that nuclear threshold?
Look, the situation was genuinely alarming. The IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, put out a report end of May 2025, based on their data from mid-May.
Okay.
Iran had stockpiled 408.6 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. And this was in the form of UF6 gas, uranium hexafluoride.
UF6 gas, right. The stuff they feed into the centrifuges.
Exactly. Now, 408.6 kilos of 60% enriched uranium. That's significant. Why? Because 60% is, technically speaking, very close to the 90% needed for weapons-grade uranium, WGU.
So most of the hard work was already done.
The vast majority, yes. Getting from natural uranium to 20% or even 60%, that's the really difficult part. The final jump to 90% is relatively quick.
And how much potential weaponry does that 408.6 kilos represent?
Well, the IAEA uses a benchmark. Roughly 42 kilograms of 60% HEU is considered enough material, once enriched further, for one bomb.
So do the math. That's almost 10 bombs worth.
Around 9, yeah. Enough for about 9 nuclear weapons, theoretically. And this wasn't just sitting there. They were churning this stuff out.
How fast?
At Fordow, primarily, they were producing about 37.5 kilograms of 60% HEU per month.
Wow. And their total stockpile?
Huh.
Across all enrichment levels?
It was huge. Over 9,200 kilograms, 9,247.6 kilograms to be precise, a massive inventory of enriched material.
That's incredible. So what was the engine, as you called it, driving this, the centrifuges?
Absolutely. Iran had built a really formidable centrifuge infrastructure. By May 2025, they had installed almost 14,700 advanced centrifuges.
Advanced ones, like the newer models?
Yeah, the IR-2 MIPS, IR-4s, and especially the IR-6s. These were mainly at Natanz and Fordow. Add in the older IR-1s, and you're looking at a total of nearly 22,000 centrifuges installed overall.
And what does that mean in terms of enrichment power?
Their total capacity was estimated around 50,000 separative work units, or SWU, per year. SWU is basically the measure of enrichment capacity. It tells you how much work they can do separating isotopes.
And those IR-6s at Fordow were key.
They were the workhorses for that 60% production, definitely. Very efficient machines, showing Iran had mastered some pretty sophisticated tech.
Okay, here's where it gets, well, frankly terrifying. With all that material, all those machines,
Yeah.
how fast could they actually make a weapon? The breakout time.
By then, yeah, the consensus among experts was that Iran's breakout time was effectively near zero.
Near zero. What does that mean in practice? Days?
If they decided to go for it, using just the 60% stockpile they already had at Fordow, they could produce enough WGU for one bomb in maybe 2 to 3 days.
2 to 3 days.
Yes, and for the whole stockpile, enough for those 9 weapons,
Right.
within 3 weeks, just using Fordow.
That's staggering. What if they use Natanz, too?
Then the numbers get even bigger. Potentially WGU for 11 weapons in the first month, maybe 22 within 4 months. It completely changed the game. Traditional warning times just evaporated.
And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. There was this huge problem with monitoring, right?
Yeah.
The IAEA was flying partially blind.
Precisely. That's a critical piece of this. Since early 2021, Iran had stopped implementing the enhanced verification measures under the old nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
So what did that mean for the inspectors?
It meant what the IAEA called a loss of continuity of knowledge. They couldn't monitor things like centrifuge manufacturing, assembly workshops, storage.
Creating a sneak-out risk.
Exactly. The nightmare scenario. Iran could be secretly building and stockpiling thousands more advanced centrifuges somewhere undeclared. An entire parallel program hidden from view.
And they made it harder for inspectors, too.
They did. They de-designated, essentially kicked out several experienced inspectors. It hampered the IAEA's ability to do its job, even at the declared sites.
So let's recap this pre-strike picture. You get a huge stockpile of near-weapons-grade fuel.
Enough for 9 bombs, growing fast.
A powerful engine of advanced centrifuges.
Capable of producing WGU in days or weeks.
And a broken alarm system. The international monitoring was severely degraded.
It was a perfect storm for proliferation risk. The capability was there, the material was there, and the visibility was compromised. A very dangerous combination.
Okay, so they could potentially break out and get the weapons-grade uranium very quickly. But what about actually building the bomb itself? That clandestine dash from gas to a metal core.
That's a different challenge, a major one. Getting the WGU is step 1. Weaponization is step 2, and it's much more complex industrially.
First off, just move the stuff. That UF6 gas is in big steel cylinders, right?
Right, Type 30B cylinders. Trying to divert those from declared sites, even with reduced monitoring, it would likely set off alarm bells. The IAEA still tracked those declared cylinders pretty closely.
So sneaking it out is tough.
Very tough, without getting caught almost immediately. The bigger challenge is what happens after you theoretically have the WGU gas.
The weaponization bottleneck you mentioned, turning gas into metal.
Exactly. It's not like baking a cake. It's a multi-stage, hazardous industrial process. You need specialized facilities, equipment, expertise.
Walk us through it briefly. What are the steps?
Okay, first you have to convert the UF6 gas to UF4, uranium tetrafluoride. They call it green salt.
Okay.
Then you mix that UF4 powder with something like magnesium metal powder inside what are basically specialized crucibles or bomb reduction vessels. You heat it up intensely.
To get pure uranium metal.
To get molten uranium metal, yeah.
Right.
It separates out and solidifies into rough chunks, sometimes called dingots. Very crude metal at this stage.
Which is a long way from a bomb core.
A very long way. Next comes purification, casting, shaping. You have to remelt those dingots, often multiple times, in high vacuum induction furnaces to purify the metal.
High vacuum.
To prevent oxidation and contamination. Then you cast the purified molten metal into precise shapes, typically hemispheres for an implosion device.
And finally,
precision machining. Those hemispheres have to be machined to incredibly tight tolerances using a high-precision computer-controlled CNC lathes. Any imperfection can cause the weapon to fail.
And Iran's capability here? Were they ready to do this on a large scale?
All the evidence suggested their work in this area was research scale, small quantities. Doing it for multiple weapons secretly. That needs a dedicated, fairly large industrial facility, not just a lab.
This is not a quick dash. It's more like
a long, complex, and detectable marathon. Yes.
Which brings us to detection. If Iran was trying to do this secretly, what clues, what telltale signatures would intelligence agencies be hunting for?
Even trying to hide it. A program like this leaves footprints. Think about the equipment needed.
Those special furnaces, the reduction vessels, CNC machines.
Exactly. Procuring those items, especially the high-precision or specialized ones, raises red flags. Then there's the waste. Making uranium metal generates specific waste products, like magnesium fluoride from the reduction step. There'd be uranium traces everywhere, contaminated equipment, crucibles, even cutting fluids from the machining. Very hard to hide completely.
Environmental signatures?
Yes. And operational signatures, too. A facility like this uses a lot of energy. It needs extensive ventilation with HEPA filters. It might have radiation detectors around it, specific construction features. It's a significant industrial fingerprint.
Now, Israel's operation in June 2025 also involved targeted killings, scientists, IRGC commanders. How much does that actually slow things down? Can you really stop a program by removing key people?
It's disruptive, no doubt. It creates fear, slows down specific projects, removes experience. But the consensus, from groups like RUSI who study this, is that it's unlikely to permanently stop a determined state program.
Because the knowledge is spread out.
Yes, Iran's program has been developing for decades. There's deep institutional resilience. They have what's called latent knowledge, the expertise, the blueprints, the understanding it exists within a wider community, not just in a few heads.
So killing individuals doesn't erase the know-how.
It makes things harder, maybe delays things, but the core technical ability likely remains. And it's crucial here to remember the difference we talked about. Breakout versus weaponization.
Breakout is getting the fissile material, days or weeks. Weaponization is building the actual device, months to a year maybe.
Right. The June strikes, especially the U.S. ones, seemed aimed squarely at preventing that rapid breakout, stopping them from getting the fuel rather than the much longer weaponization process, hitting the immediate threat.
Okay, let's shift to the how of those strikes, particularly Fordow, buried 80, 90 meters inside a mountain. How on earth did the U.S. target that effectively? Wasn't just luck.
Absolutely not luck. It was the product of years, probably decades, of intensive intelligence gathering using multiple methods, what the intel community calls multi-INT.
Multi-INT, meaning multiple kinds of intelligence fused together.
Exactly. They layer different types of intel to build a comprehensive picture. Imagery intelligence, IMNT, is foundational.
Satellite photos.
Yes, commercial ones like Maxar, Planet, plus classified government satellites. They track construction over time, tunnel entrances, ventilation shafts, power lines, security fences. You map the surface footprint precisely.
But that doesn't tell you what's deep inside or exactly how deep.
Right, for that you need other tools, like radar intelligence, RADINT, synthetic aperture radar, SAR, can see through clouds day or night.
Okay.
But even more advanced is interferometric SAR, or INSAR. This technique is amazing. It can detect tiny changes in the ground surface, like millimeter-level subsidence or uplift caused by activity below ground.
So you can map underground activity from space?
You can infer the layout, the extent, maybe even estimate the depth of underground chambers by analyzing these tiny surface movements over time. There are even algorithms reportedly developed by the U.S. Army that can estimate bunker depth from just a couple of SAR passes.
Incredible. What else?
Measurement and signature intelligence, or MASINT. This is a broad category. It includes things like thermal sensors on satellites picking up heat signatures from ventilation or cooling systems.
Heat from deep underground.
If it's vented, yes. MASINT also includes seismic and infrasound monitoring. Global networks, like those for the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, can potentially detect the faint vibrations from thousands of centrifuges spinning deep inside a mountain.
Listening for the hum of the centrifuges.
Essentially, yes. Add signals intelligence, intercepting communications, or electronic signals related to the facility's operation, and you start to build a very detailed 3D model of the target. It's like using X-rays and listening devices on a giant scale.
And all that intelligence leads to a target package. But then you need the right weapon. Hitting something 90 meters down requires serious firepower.
It requires a very specific, very powerful weapon, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the MOP.
The MOP, tell us about that.
It's a monster. A 30,000-pound bomb, that's what, about 13,600 kilograms. It's over 20 feet long, precision-guided, and carries over 5,000 pounds of high explosive wrapped in a super-hardened steel case designed to burrow through earth and concrete.
And delivery. How do you drop something that big?
That's key. It can only be carried and dropped by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. A B-2 can carry 2 of them. This capability, the B-2 plus the MOP, is unique to the United States. No one else has it.
Okay, but you said Fordow is 80, 90 meters deep. What's the MOP's penetration capability?
Public estimates are around 60 meters, maybe a bit more, through earth, or about 18 meters of reinforced concrete. So, on paper, a single MOP couldn't quite reach the main chambers at Fordow.
Which is why they didn't use just one.
Exactly. The reporting indicates they used 6 MOPs against Fordow. The thinking was likely a sequenced attack.
Sequenced, meaning?
Hitting the same spot repeatedly. The first bombs fracture and break up the overlying rock and soil, creating a path for the subsequent bombs to penetrate deeper. It's about cumulative effect, burrowing down to reach the target depth.
So it wasn't just brute force, it was an engineered solution based on that detailed intel.
Absolutely. Calculating the exact endpoints, the timing between impacts, to maximize the shock waves and achieve functional destruction deep underground. A remarkable feat of targeting and weapons effects engineering.
After the strikes, though, total confusion. The fog of war. What were the competing stories about the damage?
Oh, they were completely contradictory. You had the U.S. side, President Trump, military leaders like General Kane claiming complete and total obliteration, extremely severe damage, total success.
And Iran.
Iran immediately claimed Fordow had been evacuated beforehand and suffered no irreversible damage, basically shrugging it off.
Any middle ground.
There were reports citing unnamed Israeli officials who gave a more nuanced take. Serious damage, but not destroyed. So, yeah, complete confusion initially.
What did the hard evidence, like the satellite pictures, eventually show? Did they clear things up?
The satellite imagery was quite revealing, especially for the other sites. Guidance in Isfahan showed obvious, widespread damage to surface buildings, substations, infrastructure, clear hits.
And critically, the IAEA report later.
That was key for Nadins. The IAEA reported finding radiological and chemical contamination inside the underground halls. That's unambiguous evidence of severe damage. You only get that if centrifuge cascades have been wrecked, releasing UF6 gas and uranium particles. It confirmed Natan's underground was hit hard.
Okay, what about Fordow, the big one? What did the satellites show there?
For Fordow, the imagery showed 6 distinct large craters clustered directly over the known location of the main underground facility.
6 craters, proving they hit the target zone.
Undeniably. It proved direct, heavy precision hits right on target. Now, obviously, satellite photos can't see 90 meters underground to show you twisted metal.
Right, you can't see the centrifuges themselves.
No, but the location and number of craters were powerful evidence that the attack profile using multiple MOPs to achieve depth and shock was executed exactly as planned. It strongly suggests a significant subsurface disruption.
So the goal probably wasn't literally turning the mountain into dust, but this idea of functional destruction. Explain that.
Exactly. You don't need to pulverize every cubic meter of rock. The targets inside Fordow were those thousands of highly sensitive, finely balanced centrifuges.
Fragile machines.
Extremely fragile. They need perfect alignment, stable power, vacuum integrity. The massive shock waves from 6 30,000-pound bombs detonating nearby, even if not direct hits on every machine, would be catastrophic.
How so?
Think about it. Caverns could collapse, concrete could crack and spall, vital utility lines, power, cooling, vacuum pipes would be sheared. The shock alone could knock centrifuges off their foundations, break rotors, shatter vacuum seals. It renders the entire facility inoperable.
So functional destruction means making it useless even if it's not completely vaporized.
Precisely. The objective was likely to set back Iran's program by years, to force them into an incredibly expensive, time-consuming, and difficult rebuilding effort, all under the constant threat that it could happen again.
So the message wasn't just, we can hit you, but we can hit your most protected asset anytime we want.
That's the strategic communication, yes. Establishing a new, highly credible red line. It's about holding their most valuable nuclear assets permanently at risk. It changes the strategic calculus significantly.
Okay, wrapping this up then. Tactically, operationally, the strikes seem like a success. They degraded the known facilities, reset that near-zero breakout clock. But looking at the bigger picture from this deep dive, are we safer? Or is this a new, more dangerous era?
That's the profound question we're left with. Iran was undoubtedly pushed to a strategic crossroads. The sense of invulnerability around sites like Fordow was shattered.
So what are their options now, realistically?
Broadly, 2 paths. One is, well, capitulation. They could decide the military risk is too high, the economic pressure too great, and return to serious diplomacy, maybe even accepting major concessions like zero enrichment for sanctions relief, coming back to the table from weakness.
And the other path?
Defiance. The leadership could conclude that these attacks prove they need a nuclear weapon for ultimate security, that the current path was too vulnerable.
Which could mean?
It could mean withdrawing from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, kicking out all inspectors, and going for a full-on covert program, dispersed, hidden, maybe smaller facilities. A dash for the bomb in the shadows.
Making it much harder to track.
Infinitely harder. And this really highlights the limits of military force, doesn't it? You can bomb centrifuges, but you can't bomb knowledge. Iran retains the expertise, the latent knowledge.
And attacks might just strengthen the hardliners.
It's a real risk. Demonstrating their vulnerability could easily reinforce the argument internally that only a nuclear deterrent guarantees survival. It could backfire strategically, even if it succeeded tactically.
So time was bought. The immediate breakout threat was pushed back. But the overall proliferation danger might actually be worse now. Pushed deeper underground, harder to see, harder to manage.
That's the fear. That we traded a detectable, monitorable risk for a potentially undetectable one down the road. We might have gained time, but lost visibility.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Considering how quickly this all unfolded, the capabilities demonstrated, and the stark choices Iran now faces, what do you think is the single most critical challenge for international security in this new, much less predictable environment that emerged after June 2025?